So, kind of starts a long while back, but I'll kind of scrunch up the beginning a little bit. Um, I was born and raised in West Monroe, Louisiana, which incidentally is the same place as the Duck Commander, but I don't even like to talk about them. So, um, my dad, he wasn't my biological father, but I did not figure that out. No one told me that until I was about 14 years old. He had a long-form methamphetamine addiction, and then my mother, she was an alcoholic and a party girl, and they both were really dysfunctional. They never were together, so I'd spend part of my time with him, with my brothers, because he had 4 boys and me, and my mom had me and my little brother Cody. We grew up in a really unstable environment. The drugs would make him really fly off the handle when he got agitated about something, and my mother would bring home just strange men who definitely did not have her or our best interests in their minds or in their hearts. And we lived in a really, really bad part of town where, you know, drugs are readily available, and when we were with our mother, we were in the center of this part of town, and she would go and she would disappear for up to a few days and leave our cousin, who we were told was our sister, to like take care of us and whatnot. But one day, Lacey, who to this day I call my sister, she'd had enough. She was 16. She wanted to do 16-year-old things. She didn't want to raise 2 kids that weren't hers. And so I don't blame her, but she did leave. And she went off and did what 16-year-old girls do when they run away, I figure. But that didn't stop Mom from either never being home or being an extreme reason for both me and my brother to not want to be home when she was home. And I forgive her for that now, because she came from the Lord asked us to forgive, and He's given me forgiveness in my heart. But she herself came from a broken home, and at the time I didn't know that. But I just didn't want to be around her so much that I would go off into town and hang out with a friend of mine named Stan. And it could be a few days before I came home. The same goes with my brother. He'd go stay with his friend Edgar. And when we walked in the door, there wasn't any concern. There wasn't anything like that. It would be, oh, you're back. And so I would go and I would hang out in these places. And my friend Stan's mother, at the time, she felt like a better friend than my own mother. Which is ironic, because she allowed us to smoke at 9, 10 years old. She allowed us to drink, to smoke weed, cigarettes, and do pretty much anything in her home, which I thought was awesome, right? I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And it was that way for a few years. Between going to my dad's on the weekends and being scared out of my mind, because in my head he was essentially the boogeyman. He was the funniest guy. He still is to this day. He's extremely funny and quick-witted. But back then, when he got mad, it was terrifying. Hello, Token. Is Token here? I heard his voice. I don't know if he knows we're in area chat. One second. By the time I was 13, I had been smoking weed for probably 3 or 4 years. And I had been drinking for 2 or 3, and it was a constant thing during the week. Um, so we'd go to school, and for a long time, the one thing I focused on was, even though I was doing all this stuff outside of home, outside of school, even though on the weekends me and my friends would go and do like poor, just thieving, thug-like behavior, I was able to maintain nearly perfect scores in schooling, right? And I held on to that. My teachers were always telling me how smart I was. My family outside of my parents was always telling me how smart I was, and I really clung to that. That's the only thing in my life I had pride in, was my intellect. And it stayed that way consistently all the way up into high school. But at 14 or 15, I started feeling just really weird. I started having moments where I would just lose focus, and I couldn't. It'd just be for a little while. I'd have to go and be alone. I couldn't. Too much activity near me was uncomfortable, like sandpaper on the skin, except it's your heart. Too much chatter, too much noise, just too many things going on at once would start to really mess with me. And then a year after that, at this time, I'm still drinking and I'm still smoking, but I'm beginning to develop this thing called alcoholic neuropathy, which I didn't know until after it was a little too late, where the amount of alcohol consumption, your body can't handle it. And so the nerve endings in my fingers and my toes, they started to die. So every time I would drink, those nerve endings were directly exposed to the alcohol in my blood. And I'd wake up the next day and my hands and feet would feel like they were on fire, and they'd curl up to my chest, and my hands would. And I couldn't function for like 8 to 10 hours the next day. So that was pretty much a whole day wiped anytime I drank, so I quit drinking. But then I had this weird thing happen where I started seeing just these weird splotches in my vision. That's what I thought at first. And I started having these weird paranoid feelings all the time, even when I was sober. I'd feel like people knew something that I didn't know, but that it was information that was meant for me, so they were like hiding something. And then I started, about 6 months after that point, the timeline from 15, 16 years old all the way to 18 is very blurred, but I started seeing first shadows in the corners of my vision that would scare me or make me think that there were people around me when there weren't, or that something was following me. And at first I thought that I was possessed. That was my first genuine thought. And I hid it for a long time, and it got progressively worse. My ability to focus just slowly shut down. I couldn't keep a single train of thought. The one thing I had pride in, which was my intellect, my grades, by the time I got to be 18 years old, I was failing, but in such a way that it confused all of my teachers, because I wouldn't do the schoolwork and I wouldn't do the homework, but I would get next to perfect grades on all of my testing, all of the scoring throughout the year, which kept me from failing, like failing, but also kept me at a below average grade. Average, below average. So I had a lot of teachers wanting to talk to me. But this whole time, my hallucinations and my paranoia had skyrocketed over the course of those years, to the point where I was hearing voices, and my paranoia was cranked up to 11. If I didn't have to be somewhere, I wasn't going. Didn't matter if it was a close family member's wedding or a birthday party for a niece or nephew, or my own brothers, my own brothers celebrating their various things. It didn't matter. I just wasn't gonna go. But I had to go to school because I had missed so much that I had a court order to go to school or go to a juvenile detention center. And somewhere in the middle of all that, to escape my problems and to kind of help me deal with everything going on, I developed a methamphetamine addiction just like my father. I would do it every day before school, and then around lunchtime in school, and then before I went home, I would go to my friend Stan's house and his mom would give us more. And during the summer, I stayed at my friend Stan's house 24/7 through all them years, and we would do whatever they had, whether it was the K2 fake weed stuff, or it was meth, or it was acid, just whatever was available at the time. And I'm sure that only served to make it worse, but I was living in sin. I was living in such a way that it didn't even feel like sinning anymore. It didn't feel wrong anymore. It just felt like life. And
I'll be right back.
Gotcha, buddy. And about, I want to say, 8 months to a year and a half after beginning a steady consumption of methamphetamines, I decided one day to just stop doing that because it seemed to only be making my symptoms worse. And at this point, I had heard about different mental disorders like the edgy stuff that everybody hears about, like DID and stuff like that. And I thought that's what I had, because I would have these thoughts that at first felt separate from me. It felt like something else's thoughts that I could just perceive. But as time went on, my thoughts and the thoughts that felt like they were outside of me began to get pushed together so I could no longer tell the difference. I was having full-blown hallucinations of people and awful things. And I don't remember a lot of the detail of my life from 2016 to 2018, the end of 2018, but I remember the day that it got so bad that I couldn't pretend like it wasn't happening anymore. I had gone to high school. It was my last year of high school. And the day started badly. The second I opened my eyes, I was paranoid. I could hear noises coming from all around, scratching on the walls, and I was having these violent, angry thoughts that consumed the entirety of my mind. I couldn't focus on anything else. And I got on the school bus, and I went to school, and I go into the lunchroom for breakfast, and there are so many people all around me, more than normal, way more than normal, and I'm hearing the sound of feet walking across the ground as students make their way back and forth, and it feels like thunder. And I'm hearing the talking, not just things in my head, but the chatter of hundreds of students kind of milling about and talking amongst themselves all at once. And in my head, I'm convinced that all of them are evil and guilty and all these other insane things. And I begin to feel... I'm standing in the lunch line, and I'm worried about all of this, and I finally get to the point where you can grab your tray with your food on it, right? And the girl in front of me is stopped, and she's talking to the lunch lady, and she's complaining to her. And I want to preface this next part with what I saw happen did not happen. And I just put that out there because a lot of people could see me in a very different light if I did not explain that beforehand. It felt like fire inside my chest, and I was so agitated, and I hated this girl. I had never seen this girl in my life as far as I was aware before that day, but in that moment she was the worst enemy I had ever had in my entire life. Like her very existence was a spit in my face. And I saw myself assault her in a very realistic way, a very violent way, in a way that she would not have survived. And then I opened my eyes and she's still standing there talking, just talking to the lunch lady, and it freaked me out, and it snapped me back to my senses, and my heart was racing. And immediately I dropped my bag, I dropped whatever it was that I was holding. I remember hearing it hit the floor, and I bolted toward the doors of the school. And I busted out, and they sent an officer to come and get me. And they could see that I was very distraught, and I wouldn't tell them why, so they took me home. And my mother just so happened to be home, and I convinced her to take me to the nearest doctor, because I couldn't, if it was going to get to the point where I couldn't tell what I myself had done, then I couldn't hide this anymore. And so I go to the doctor, and I tell him everything that happened, and I tell him, but then I open my eyes, and she was still there, and she was good. And he tells me, no, we got a call from the sheriff's office because they know you're here, and all of that did actually happen, and they're looking for you. At the time I didn't know, but he was lying to me, because he told me, now I want you to go straight to the hospital and tell them everything you told me and get into a clinic. And I didn't know that they were just trying to scare me to quickly go to the clinic. So I thought, now my entire perspective of reality is so warped, because I saw what I saw, but then I saw her okay, so now I don't know what's real and what's not. And I go to the hospital, and I spend 2 or 3 weeks there in a little ward where they mix together mental patients and drug addicts, which is a stupid idea. But they tell me that I have schizophrenia, right? And they reaffirm me that that what I saw happen did not happen. And at first, that felt good, because at first that felt good because I had a name for what I was going through, and they assured me that with enough time they could get me a cocktail of medicine that was going to suppress my symptoms. And we probably went through 30 or 40 different cocktails of things, and they even, at one point, they started injecting me in the neck, but nothing worked. Nothing at all. It just made me feel like a zombie, so I wasn't as reactive to the things I was feeling. And at that point, I kind of gave up. I stopped taking the medicine. I had bought a house for extremely cheap, but I just needed to get away. And actually I bought 2 houses for extreme, I mean, I say houses, these were dilapidated. They were the cheapest things I could possibly find, and I spent more money on them than I had ever had in my hand or in my account at any time in my life. And the first one I bought, they went to go move it, and it broke in half and was destroyed. So then I bought another house, and it took a while to get the money for it. But I couldn't live with my mother because she had recently begun using methamphetamines, and she and I in the same house were very, very toxic towards one another. But I couldn't go out anymore. I could not go outside. I didn't go to get groceries. I didn't go to do anything. I didn't. Nothing. I couldn't. It was too horrifying to be in public at all, ever. And so I eventually got this house, and I moved into it. And I would go through, if I didn't have what I needed to get by, I just didn't tell anybody. And I didn't go outside, and I didn't go to the store, even though I lived right across the street from a convenience store, because I couldn't. I couldn't force myself to. And my condition got worse and worse, and sometimes I'd go 2 or 3 days without drinking water, without eating. My hair was knotted. And then my mother, her late fiance at the time, he died, and she couldn't afford the bills. So I moved her in with me, which was a bad decision, but it was done out of my mother can't be on the street. And just like you would probably expect, it was a very bad situation. So I traded her. I said, if you go out and you buy a cheap camper, trade it to me, and I'll let you have my house because I can't live with you. And she did. And when I got that camper, I moved it out to where near my dad used to live, but at that point he and I hadn't been talking for so long that I didn't know. What I didn't know was that he had gotten clean a year before then, and he had come to Christ, and Christ had turned his life around and delivered him from his 25 plus year addiction. That he was going to church, that he was praying to God that his family would come back together, and there I show up with a camper, having not talked to him in probably 2 years, in the worst shape of my life, and he was fine with it. I put my stuff out there on his land, and I continued to get worse. I continued to not go anywhere until one night I had been reading scripture for a few weeks, and I had been praying because I didn't see another way out. I didn't see another way that I was going to get out of this. So I appealed to God. And I said, God, I'm not going to make it through this. I'm not going to be okay. I need you to show me what it is that I'm doing wrong. Because I had been trying to find any kind of work from home. I had been trying to find any kind of break, any kind of anything to just do a little better, to be able to afford food, to be able to afford water, to be able to afford a vehicle to go places and do normal person things, because I hadn't done normal person things in a decade at that point. And I'm sitting there and I'm praying to him, and he shows up. I feel his presence fill the little tiny bedroom of the camper where I'm on my knees, and I haven't showered in days, and I haven't eaten in days, and my hair is matted, and I do not look presentable, and yet there the God of the universe showed up and let me feel his presence and his love. And then, without words, almost like intentions, he showed me that everything that I thought was going to save me was a temporary, crumbling thing of this world, and that he was the only way. And not 30 seconds after that, I get a knock at my front door, so I quickly stand up and I throw a blanket around my body. And I barely open the door because I stink. I am matted. I don't have water, like running or drinkable. And I don't want anyone to see me this way, because I've been hiding this thing for over a decade from everybody that I love. Up until I went to the hospital. And even then, even though people knew now, I couldn't bring myself to let them see how bad it was. And I opened the door, and it's my dad. And that was the first time I saw his face since his addiction. And it was clear, and his eyes were kind for the first time that I had ever seen them kind. And he said to me, "Bubba, do you want to go with me to a men's retreat in 2 weeks?" And my heart screamed no, but my mouth said yes. And something amazing happened that night, because when I woke up the next day, for the first time in years, I didn't hear any voices. I didn't see anything. I didn't have any paranoia. And I start going to church with my father. I start really delving into the scripture, into who Christ is, and how you bring yourself to him. And I go on this men's retreat, and I experience what it is to be around men of the faith. And I experience what it is to be around godliness for the first time. And I come home, and 2 weeks after that, I get baptized in a pond on my grandparents' land. And I didn't know it. It was a cow pond. And it was the same cow pond my dad had gotten baptized in the day that the Lord called him into deliverance from meth.
Amen.
And to this day, it's been my perception of time back then was so skewed from the warping of my mind. But from that point to this day, I have not heard anything. I have not been paranoid. My perception's not been warped. I am able to focus my mind on tasks again. I know the love of Christ, and I have seen him in every work, in every way. He is my Lord and Savior. He has delivered me and given me back my life. And so I've given my life to him. I got ordained as a minister after studying both under the Pentecostals and the Baptists, but I got ordained at a non-denominational church because the Lord in prayer has spoken to me that now is the time to bring his word to every place. Now is the time to bring his people forward to the altar of his glory. And now is the time that the church needs to be united and standing together in all places, in all ways. And so I'm giving him my life, my devotion, my attention, because he gave me back a life that I thought was already over. I didn't mention this earlier, but when I moved into that camper, I had come into possession of a 45-70 rifle, and I had 2 bullets. And I had told myself many times over and over again, if I can't fix myself, if I can't fix this in a year, I'm just gonna eat one. And it wasn't probably a month or 2 after that the Lord delivered me. And that is my testimony.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you all for listening.
It's amazing.